This is Faisal bin al-Hussein bin Ali al-Hashemi, better known as Faisal I, the first king of Iraq. Before he got that title, however, Faisal was king of another country, the Arab Kingdom of Syria. While it only existed for a little over 4 months, after which point France invaded Syria, resulting in Faisal's exile and establishment of a League of Nations Class A mandate, the Arab Kingdom of Syria would inspire later Arab liberation movements in the region. And in wake of recent events, well, somewhat recent events, perhaps it's worth exploring this overlooked chapter of Syrian history. Oh, and as always, for any of our subscribers out there, consider clicking on the bell to get all notifications. That way you'll never miss out on any upcoming videos. And even if you're not a subscriber, like roughly 90% of our viewers, you can always subscribe, like this video, or comment. It really does help out the channel and means a lot to us. Arab nationalism, a political ideology asserting that Arabs constitute a single nation, gained momentum during the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Generally speaking, the demands of Arab nationalists prior to World War I were of a reformist nature and included greater autonomy, use of Arabic in education, and changes in peacetime conscription to allow Arab conscripts local service in the Ottoman army. One such organization then advocating for Arab autonomy within the Ottoman Empire was al-Fatah, the Young Arab Society. Founded in 1911, al-Fatah originally aimed to protect Arab rights in wake of the Young Turk Revolution, which saw Istanbul adopt more pro-Turkish policies. Al-Fatah, however, soon began to advocate for Arab independence and by the eve of World War I, saw an opportunity to press their demands. The group also collaborated with other Arab nationalist organizations, including Al-Ahad, the Covenant Society, a group of Arab officers in the Ottoman army. And this all laid the groundwork for the Arab Revolt, an armed uprising by the House of Hashim, also known as the Hashemites. The revolt was supported by the British, who promised Arab independence in exchange for their assistance against the Ottomans. This agreement was largely embodied in the McMahon-Hussein Correspondence, a series of letters exchanged between Hussein bin Ali al-Hashimi, the Sharif and Emir of Mecca, and Sir Henry McMahon, the British High Commissioner in Egypt. With the help of British officers such as T.E. Lawrence, the famed Lawrence of Arabia, Arab forces scored significant victories capturing key towns and disrupting Ottoman supply lines. What's more, under the leadership of Hussein, Arab forces were able to expel the Ottomans and establish the Hashemite Kingdom of Hejaz in 1916. Further north, the British-Egyptian Expeditionary Force, working in tandem with Arab forces, assisted in the capture of Damascus on October 1, 1918. Here, Hussein's third son, Faisal ibn Hussein bin Ali al-Hashemi, entered the city as a hero, greeted by enthusiastic crowds who viewed the moment as the dawn of Arab independence. Faisal had come to expect an independent Arab kingdom encompassing much of the former Ottoman Arab territories. Yet, shortly after the conclusion of World War I, Faisal was informed of the Sykes-Picot Agreement, a secret pact between Britain and France that divided the Ottoman lands into spheres of influence. The Sykes-Picot Agreement, negotiated in 1916 between British diplomat Sir Mark Sykes and French diplomat Francois-Georges Picot, was driven by the strategic interests of the two powers. The British aimed to secure control over territories that would safeguard their empire's access to India, particularly through the Suez Canal, while the French sought to extend their colonial influence into the Levant. According to the agreement, Britain would control most of Mesopotamia, aka Iraq, Transjordan, and parts of what is today Israel and Palestine, while France would dominate southeastern Turkey, Kurdistan, Syria, and Lebanon. The Palestine region, what sometimes was then called Historic Palestine, was designated for international administration due to its religious significance. The agreement allowed the British and French to define their mutually agreed spheres of influence and control in anticipation of the eventual partitioning of the Ottoman Empire. For Faisal, however, the revelation of this agreement was a profound betrayal, as it contradicted the promises of independence made during the McMahon-Hussein Correspondence, in which the British government agreed to recognize Arab independence in a large region after the war in exchange for Faisal's father, Hussein, launching the Arab Revolt against the Ottoman Empire. Nevertheless, Faisal still believed details about the post-war framework for the region could still be negotiated at a later date. That being said, the San Remo Conference of April 1920 further clarified post-war plans for the region, with the League of Nations officially granting France a mandate over Syria and Lebanon. The mandate system was devised to administer former Ottoman and German territories under the supervision of the League of Nations, categorizing them based on their presumed readiness for self-governance. Syria and Lebanon were designated as Class A mandates, indicating they were considered the most advanced and closest to achieving independence, though they still required administrative guidance from a mandatory power. For the Arab world, this classification was perceived as just a veneer to justify colonial control. And thus, the resolution of the San Remo Conference effectively laid the groundwork for the confrontation between Arab and French forces in Syria, as it underscored the disparity between the aspirations of Arab nationalists and the geopolitical ambitions of European powers. Nevertheless, in March 1920, the Syrian National Congress, a body of Arab nationalists, convened in Damascus and passed the Damascus Program, a declaration of independence. Faisal expressed his intention to establish a fully independent Arab constitutional government, a vision that reflected the aspirations of the Arab people for self-rule. The Congress proclaimed Faisal as King of Syria, encompassing modern-day Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, Israel, Palestine, and even parts of Turkey and Iraq. This marked the establishment of the Arab Kingdom of Syria. In response, the King Crane Commission was dispatched in 1919 to gauge the desires of the local population regarding self-rule. Originally envisioned as an international investigation with representatives from France, Britain, Italy, and the United States, it ultimately became a solely American endeavor after the other nations withdrew. These countries, unwilling to risk being confronted by recommendations from their own appointed delegates that might conflict with their policies, left the United States to carry out the investigation alone. The King Crane Commission's findings recommended against French rule, citing strong support for independence among the local population. It also opposed the establishment of a Jewish state in Palestine, warning that it could lead to significant unrest. However, the recommendations were largely ignored by the Allied powers. France, determined to enforce its mandate over Syria, denied the existence of the Arab Kingdom of Syria, and French forces landed in Beirut on November 18, 1919. In June of that year, the so-called Alawite Revolt erupted in the western mountains of Syria, when Saleh al-Ali, an Alawi noble, pledged his allegiance to the Arab Kingdom of Syria in opposition to foreign rule. Although the Alawite Revolt was ultimately suppressed, it signaled widespread dissatisfaction with foreign domination. Simultaneously, the Hananu Revolt, also known as the Aleppo Revolt or the Northern Revolts, unfolded in northern Syria from 1919 to 1921. Led by Ibrahim Hananu, this resistance movement aimed to oppose French occupation through guerrilla warfare. As all this occurred, Yusuf al-Azma, the kingdom's Minister of War, declared emergency measures in the Syrian National Congress, including press censorship, the power to seize civilian vehicles for military use, and a call for militias across the country to support the army. Inspired by Kemal Ataturk's success against the French in Turkey, al-Azma sought to follow in the latter's path in Syria. That being said, Faisal understood the kingdom's army was woefully unprepared and under-equipped for a serious confrontation against the French, despite the willingness of al-Azma and others to fight. On July 14, 1920, France issued an ultimatum to the kingdom to disband its army and submit to French control. On July 18th, Faisal and the Syrian National Congress met. All ministers except for al-Azma agreed to not enter into war with France. After Faisal ratified the cabinet's decision, al-Azma withdrew his troops from Anjar, the hills overlooking the Bekaa Valley from the east and the Beirut-Damascus road. On July 20th, 6 hours prior to the ultimatum's deadline, Faisal informed French diplomats in Damascus of his acceptance to Paris's terms. Riots broke out in Damascus and other cities when news of Faisal's submission to the French was learned of, resulting in some 200 deaths. Al-Azma meanwhile rejected calls to disband and implored the king for an opportunity to confront French forces. He got his chance on July 24th. Instead of disbanding, al-Azma gathered a small, ill-equipped force and led them to confront the French, who, not having received word of the Syrian surrender, advanced on Maysalun. Despite their bravery, the Syrian forces were quickly overwhelmed by the French, whose superior firepower and organization ensured their victory. Al-Azma was killed in battle, and his sacrifice became a symbol of Syrian resistance against colonial domination. The siege and capture of Damascus, which occurred shortly thereafter, marked a definitive end to the Arab Kingdom of Syria. Faisal surrendered to French forces and was then expelled from the region. In August, he went into exile and took refuge in the United Kingdom. Despite this setback, however, Faisal's political career did not end there. In August 1921, he was offered the crown of Iraq under the British Mandate of Iraq, becoming its first king. That's something we plan to cover in a future video. Anyway, I'm going to give the Arab Kingdom of Syria a 6 on the Ghost Countries Index. Although it's mostly overlooked nowadays, this chapter of Middle Eastern history is tied into Arab nationalism, which later gave rise to Pan-Arabism and helped formulate a Syrian national identity in wake of the Ottoman Empire's dissolution. That being said, I'd really like to hear your opinions, so please let me know your thoughts in the comments section. Also, a huge thank you once again to all of our supporters over on Patreon. We've also already got some Patreon exclusive content up there, so if you'd like to help support the channel and get access to stuff like that, there's a link down in the description.